I feel like I like sit hunched over too much that I have my head leaning back right now and it hurts because like I'm like normally hunched back. Let's learn about how a passenger misses a stop and then kills 56. I've never watched a fascinating horror video, so I hope I get fascinated and horrified.
On the 27th of June, 1988, a busy commuter train was bound for Paris's Gare de Lyon
Paris.
station. Midway through its journey, however, a passenger activated the emergency brake and left the train.
Oh.
Though it was not apparent at the time, this passenger had just set in motion a sequence of events that would lead to the third deadliest railway disaster in France ever to take place.
Oh my
in
god,
peacetime.
really?
The Société Nationale de Chemin de Fer, or SNCF, is the state-owned national railway company of France. Founded in 1938, much of its infrastructure was forcibly commandeered by German invaders during World War II, before being returned to the French when Germany was finally defeated. Since then, the SNCF has grown to manage hundreds of high-speed and regular commuter rail lines across the country.
Let's go high-speed rail!
One such line was the route from Melun in northern France to the large mainline Gare de Lyon station in Paris. A journey of around 80 kilometers or 50 miles. This was, naturally, a popular route for commuters working in the city. As the summer season approached, the SNCF made some changes to their timetables. One such change was to remove the intermediary station, Le Ver de Maisons, as a stop for some services on the route. On the 27th of June 1988, the 5:38 p.m. service from Melun was running on time as it approached Le Ver de Maisons, reaching the station around 6:39 p.m. In accordance with its new timetable, it was set to pass straight through. But before it could do so, a woman in the second car rose from her seat and activated the emergency brake. As well as triggering an alarm in the driver's cabin, this also triggered an automatic brake application that brought the train to a halt while still partially in the station. The woman who had activated the brake quickly left her car and exited the station, leaving other passengers bewildered as to her motive. The driver of the train that day was 42-year-old Daniel Solène, a man who had worked on the railways ever since he was a teenager, and was...
I don't know, I can't imagine hitting the emergency brake just because, like, suddenly the train's not stopping at your station. I'll just be like, oh shit, well, I guess I gotta take another train back. Oh well. Like, I don't know, I guess if it was like a real emergency, I can see it, like, being necessary, but most of the time, like, I would just be like, oh shit, I guess I gotta eat the return ticket cost.
Generally respected as a competent and careful driver. He was assisted by guard Jean Beauvais, another long-serving SNCF employee. Driver Solène left his cabin and surveyed the train. In order to get moving again, he would need to reset the brakes, which he promptly...
Maybe she thought it'd be like taking a bus? I don't know. It seems like... Hold on, I wonder if I can see the... Yeah.
...to a halt while still partially in the station. The woman who had activated the brake quickly left her car and exited
Show me the image
station,
again.
Leaving other passengers bewildered as to her motive.
I feel like it says right here, alarm. Don't pull. Unless it's danger, right? It's I see the word danger here. And ne, which I'm sure means no. I don't know French, but I feel like that's... Yeah, to be so selfish. I can't imagine, right? It's like, I realize you probably want to get to where you need to go, but it's your fault for not checking the new timetable, I guess, right? Like, these things happen sometimes. You just gotta readjust.
Serving SNCF employee. Driver Solène left his cabin and surveyed the train. In order to get moving again, he would need to reset the brakes, which he promptly did by pulling a lever at the rear of the locomotive. Because this lever was stiff, he braced himself against another handle for leverage and inadvertently turned this lever as well. Without realizing it, driver Solène had closed the main brake valve and separated the pneumatic braking system into two isolated sections, the locomotive and the rest of the train. Returning to the driver's cab, Solène found the brakes still locked. At this stage, he should have called a technician to inspect the train before attempting to move it again. But, convinced that he knew what the problem was, he did not do so. Instead, he assumed that the sudden emergency stop had created too much pressure in the braking system, and that the brakes throughout the train simply needed to manually have some pressure removed from them in order to fix the problem. Accordingly, Solène and Bovy did just this. They worked their way down the train, manually bleeding air from the brakes on each car. They thought that they were resolving a routine issue, but they weren't. Because Solène had unknowingly closed the main valve to the braking system, there was no way for the brakes on each car to refill to the correct pressure once they had been bled. Rather than releasing excess pressure, the two men were removing from the system the pressure necessary for the train to effectively brake.
No.
When driver Solène returned to the locomotive, the pressure gauge there showed the correct pressure. It did so only because the locomotive was isolated from the other cars. Considering the problem solved, he got the service back underway. Many passengers had disembarked during the half hour it had taken for the guard and driver to fix the problem with the train. The train was now very behind schedule. To make up some time, a controller instructed Solène to skip the next stop and head straight on to the terminus of the route, Gare de Lyon. Because of this, Solène only discovered that his brakes were barely functional when he passed a yellow signal on approach to his final stop. By this time, the train was on a relatively steep downward slope, and the little braking power left was insufficient to stop it. Solène made a panicked radio call to controllers, stating that he had no brakes, but not clearly identifying which train he was calling from. Before anyone could reply,
damn it, it was like a multi-level failure. Oh my god. They might have been able to help him had they known which train he was on.
He activated an emergency alarm, left his cab, and ran back through the train, encouraging passengers to move to the back of the train and brace for a collision. The emergency alarm was broadcast across the radio network, prompting every driver who heard it to bring their train to a halt. A flurry of radio messages to controllers followed, making their task of communicating warnings about the runaway train even more complex. This general alarm had other detrimental effects. The points leading into Gare de Lyon had been pre-programmed to switch the incoming train to an empty track, but the general alarm disabled this pre-programming and gave full control to operators. This was intended to allow them to better control trains in an emergency, but in this case it was fatal. Rather than heading towards an empty platform, the runaway train was now barreling towards a delayed train waiting at platform 2 of Gare de Lyon.
What the fuck?
This delayed train had been poised to leave, but the general alarm required every train in the vicinity to stop in place, meaning that this train now could not move out of danger. By the time controllers were able to correctly identify the runaway train, there was less than a minute to go until impact. Warnings were broadcast through the station public address system, prompting some passengers to evacuate the platform.
This
The
really
driver
just
of the
fucking
delayed train
cannonballed.
waiting at platform 2 was André Tanguy. Upon hearing the announcement regarding the incoming runaway train, he voluntarily remained in his driver's cab and used the train's public address system to further encourage passengers to evacuate. Consequently, he did not survive the collision.
Oh man.
He was not alone. The delayed train, which had been sitting at the platform for some time, was packed with passengers, not all of whom could access the doors or get clear of the platform in time. Almost 100 people were left trapped in the wreckage, many of them seriously injured by the impact. Emergency workers arrived at the station just 10 minutes later and began the long process of extricating passengers from the crush zone. The rescue effort went on into the following day. By midday, on the 28th of June, it was determined that nobody was left alive in the remains of the crushed train cars. In total, 56 people had lost their lives in the accident, and 60 had sustained serious injuries.
My god.
A government investigation followed. The fact that a passenger had activated the emergency brake soon emerged, and a brief media campaign was launched to try and identify this passenger. The day after the crash, she came forward voluntarily. She was a 21-year-old mother who had been on her way to pick up her children from school when she realized the train would not stop at her station.
Oh my God.
Worried that she might be late, she had used the emergency brake to stop the train so that she could leave. She was issued
That's not an emergency.
A fine for inappropriate use of the emergency brake, but faced no further consequences.
'Cause, like, you don't expect, right? Like, right, using the emergency brake, yes, you should be fined for, like, misusing emergency services. I don't think it's her fault that everyone died. I feel like there were a lot of failures that, like, compounded into the loss of life, but I don't blame her for everyone dying. I feel like, I don't know, the train driver should have called for service. Yeah, even though he was an experienced driver, he didn't realize he had pressed down another lever that, like, fucked up the brakes. It was just, like, a compounding, and then, like, he wasn't able to identify his train, which ended up him crashing into the other train. And then they could have, like, diverted that train into another empty track. Jesus.
The driver, Daniel Solen, however, was found to have made numerous mistakes, and was consequently charged with manslaughter. Though he had not intended to cause any harm, many of his actions had done so unintentionally.
Yeah, that's what
His
manslaughter is
accidental
for.
closing of the brake valve, his decision not to call a technician when he should have done so, his failure to identify his train when communicating the emergency to controllers, and, most notably of all, the fact that in his panicked state, he completely forgot that there was a backup electrical brake that he could have used to slow down the runaway train.
There was another brake. Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, no, lock him up. Lock him up. When you're a train driver responsible for hundreds of lives, it is your responsibility to be well aware of the brakes, right? I expect my drivers in these situations to know the thing that they're driving.
Solen was sentenced to 4 years in prison for his actions, but was released after serving 6 months. His conviction was contentious from the beginning. Some, including an SNCF workers' union, argued that Solen was under pressure to keep to schedule, and that it would be better to address systemic problems, for example, the general alarm making radio communication difficult, than to blame the disaster on one man.
No, he wasn't a random guy. He had worked there for, like, several years. He was an experienced driver. Yes, it's systemic, but also, at the same point, you have to be able to think for yourself and be like, hey, I think I need to call a technician to make sure to service the train. I've definitely been on a train and had to, like, switch trains and I had to go on a stop and then another train would come by and pick us up. Right? I wouldn't mind having to get onto a different train if it meant that my train was, like, 100% safe.
A memorial stands on the platform where the collision took place. In the aftermath of the disaster, the SNCF also made a number of changes to their stock. Their communications system was updated, and drivers were given the ability to override passenger emergency brake activations. New buffers were also installed at Gare de Lyon station, all interventions which make another accident less likely, and the network far safer and more protected against human error.
I wish it didn't have to come to that, right? A lot of these safety things people don't think of until something terrible happens. I wish people thought more about what ifs, right? I really wish people thought more about what if. And then, like, think of, like, any possible horrible accident that could happen. And then they should do regular, like, testing and drills for this. It's like, if this happens, what do you do? Yeah, safety regulations are definitely written in blood. That sucks. Yeah, I need to have plan A, B, C, D, E. I need at least 15 plans, please. My God. I'm surprised the woman even came forward. Like, I don't know. Some people would have never come forward. But I think the media campaign pressured her to come forward. We try to catch stuff before the disaster. Yeah. Inspectors are so valued. Even if the people, when you're coming to inspect are like, oh god, the inspector's here, fuck them. There's a good reason you're there. But think of the poor millionaire shareholders. You're so right. If the system failed because of one stupid passenger, it was doomed to fail from the start. Yeah. I don't blame her. Yeah, Andre was a hero. The guy who stayed back in his train to, like, give the order to evacuate, he was a real fucking trooper. If she hadn't come forward, they would have found her. This was 1988. I don't know. It was 1988. I really doubt they would have found her. There was a similar train derailment in Taiwan. A single person caused a deadly chain of events that killed dozens. A flatbed truck from a construction site rolled down a hill onto the tracks just before a tunnel. A train came and hit the truck, derailed, and everything piled into the tunnel, which is barely wide enough for one train to pass. Oh my god. It was like walking into a human blender. That's fucking disgusting. Oh my god. That's fucking horrifying. But also fascinating. Thank you, fascinating horror. Thank you for the small history lesson on an accident.